Sunday night might have felt like a deja vu or maybe a nightmare for Texas A&M because once again, their ridiculous comeback attempt against Houston fell just short.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Sunday evening to all of you tuning in live. Happy Monday, though, to everyone watching or listening to this back later. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This wonderful human over here is Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listener or watch. And by the way, you can find this ad-free on Amazon Music. Big shout out to our friends over there at Amazon. Also, special shout out to all of you everydayers out there hanging out with us. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure might be waiting around just the next corner? Well, why don't you take the Nissan Rogue or Pathfinder or Armada and go find your next big adventure? Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Andy, the Sweet 16 is set. And of course, in a bonkers year like this one, where teams apparently didn't want to win on the road, they're like, here, take the number next to our name. It ends up being a crazy chalky Sweet 16. 53 is the seed aggregate. That's the sixth lowest in the modern era of college basketball. But Andy, the good news about it, what's our mantra? Upsets early, chocolate. That just means it's going to be great basketball this weekend. So buckle up for that. Speaking of great basketball, shout out to Ben Miller, who is the current leader of the Locked On College Basketball March Madness bracket pool. He's got 500 points and is in the 98.7th percentile on ESPN. Ben, way to go. Keep it up. Good luck the rest of the way. But Andy, there is obviously nowhere else we could start today's show than by unpacking Houston and Texas A&M. And Andy, the reason I say deja vu is because folks might not remember, but back on December 16th, Texas A&M and Houston played. Houston was up 21 with like 15 minutes to go. Texas A&M roared all the way back to tie it up with 91 seconds left, only to see Houston pull it out in regulation. Andy, this was almost a copy and paste carbon copy version of that. You hate it for Buzz Williams and the Aggies, but it means that we do have all 4-1 seeds still going. Let's get right into this, talking about Houston Cougars, who were able to pull it out with four dudes sitting on the bench having fouled out.
Yeah, it was completely insane to see basically the exact same thing happen as a recap of that game back in December. This Texas A&M team has been wildly inconsistent throughout the year. There were many, many times between that game against Houston in December and now where they didn't look, frankly, at all like an NCAA tournament team. And yet here they are, very, very close, literally inches away from potentially winning this game, being the only team to upset a one seed before the Sweet 16, getting to be one of the three SEC teams in this case they would be to advance all the way to the Sweet 16. But instead, they fall just short. Free throws were a massive issue for A&M all game. I think they missed like 16 or 17 total in the contest, just did not knock them down throughout the game and certainly didn't knock them down during the stretch of the game when they really needed to. But what a Herculean effort from Wade Taylor IV, a guy who's been inconsistent throughout the year along with his team, but he hit big shot after big shot after big shot and continued to keep this team in it, put them in a position where they could get that tied shot at the end of the game. Anderson Garcia, a guy who has made that was his ninth made three of the season. For those of you who watch this, a bounce pass from Tyrese Radford into Garcia, 1 second left in regulation. They were down three. He buries the three, sends this thing into overtime. It was pandemonium, one of the most insane shots that I have seen in a losing effort for a team. In a year without a lot of parity, we did have a few teams put up incredibly huge fights to try to get into the Sweet 16. Oregon fell just short against Creighton. Here, Texas A&M falls just short against Houston, but incredible efforts from both those teams. Sick for A&M because they had chances to win this one and didn't quite pull it out.
And it was, speaking of inconsistent, Wade Taylor, sure, he hit big shot after big shot, but Andy, who was 5 of 26 in this game, just kind of on par with what they've done all season. You know, A&M's going to be kicking themselves for that free throw line performance. Yeah. They were 29 of 45. It's not like Houston set the world on fire from there either, but it wasn't as bad as A&M. Also, I was thinking back to, you remember, as A&M was making their comeback, which, by the way, they were down 12 with a minute 52 to go, Andy.
Yeah.
That was insane. But in that comeback stretch, on two different occasions, once by Wade Taylor and once by Tyrese Radford, they had a three where just barely on the line. That was 2 points left on the board, Andy. Maybe they win this thing somehow in regulation, right? So there's just all those what-if moments that you always have in a game like this. So just really, really crazy stuff.
Got to shout out Ryan Elvin too. Ryan Elvin, walk on for Houston. He took 4 free throw attempts in the entire season up to this point. He had to come into the game because Houston's entire starting lineup fouled out of this game. Elvin comes in, and you just knew that A&M was going to find a way to force the ball to go to him so that they could foul him. And it was one of those things where it just felt like we were seeing it happen before it even happened. In my mind, it was just like there's no possible way that if it was a Disney script, people would be like, "Oh, that's too unbelievable. Of course, the ball is going to go to the walk-on." But that's what happened. And he gets the ball, and they got a 2-point lead. He's got a 3-point lead. They got to knock at least one down. He misses the first one. Everybody's feeling it. Everybody's tight in the arena, and yet he knocks down the next one, gives them a 4-point lead very calmly. 4th made free throw of the season for Ryan Elvin. He deserves his flowers. He deserves a shout out. It is really hard, not only to come into a game when you haven't played in the last 2 hours, you've been sitting on the bench. That's hard enough, but to do it when you're not somebody who's normally a part of that rotation, somebody who's not typically counted on in late clutch game situations, I mean, that is a difficult situation to be in, and he did what he needed to do to give his team a win. That's very impressive.
And Andy, not only should we give Elvin his flowers, but this whole team, because how many times, like, I know there's going to be people saying things like this. Well, look at how UConn boat raced Northwestern, or what Purdue did in their game. And so clearly Houston's not up to par. But Andy, how often do we see it where a team has to just survive an earlier round game to make their way through eventually winning the national? I mean, I could go through just about every national champion and point to a game.
UConn's one of the very few that you can't, because they won every game by like 13. But that's
right. Yes, which is the only time that's ever happened. But like, it's just like Houston doing this maybe gets a little bit of a monkey off the back, and then they can go forward. So just great job by Kelvin Sampson. Really good job by the guys to keep making plays down the stretch, while Texas A&M, like in overtime, is getting a little loose with it and taking just some silly shots. Meanwhile, Jamal Shedd's out there showing why he's a first-team All-American, Andy. And to me, that was the difference in overtime between these two teams.
Well, you mentioned the you mentioned the one seeds not all losing, or not all having those close games, and that was absolutely the case on Sunday. Purdue and UConn both played their games. UConn's score looks a little closer than the actual end result was, but they dominated wire to wire against Northwestern to advance to the Sweet 16. They're going to take on San Diego State. Interestingly, a rematch of the national championship last year.
I'm so excited for that, dude. That's awesome.
4 times. This will be the 4th time that's ever happened. Where the next year, that's very first time since Florida. Interestingly enough, there's another connection there potentially with UConn and the path that they're trying to take here. But Purdue, I mean, Isaac, this team just flat out dominated. I expected Utah State to put up a fight. I expected them to keep this thing close. They're an incredibly well-coached team. Danny Sprinkle's one of the best coaches in the country. Great Osobor is fantastic. This team has the juice, but Purdue just buried them. I mean, just absolutely buried them. 106-67 was the final score here. The largest margin of victory in a round of 32 game, at least by a 1 seed. I think it might be ever, if I have my stats correctly. Zach Edey put together what would be a monstrous game in just the first half. 21 points. I think he had 21 points, 11 rebounds, a steal, and 2 blocks, 3 assists. All of that in the first half. He barely played in the second half. I was going to say
they didn't need him in the second. They didn't need
him. Why would you play him more and risk? I mean, when he just gets bodied every single possession, why would you continue to play him? They made the smart decision, kept him on the bench, partly because Trey Kaufman-Renn was playing outstanding. I think he had like 18 and 8 in this game as well. Utah State just didn't have it in this one, but Purdue, man, they are absolutely rolling right now. Arguably the 2 hottest teams in the tournament right now are Purdue and Gonzaga. That's going to be an incredible matchup on Friday between those 2 teams.
It very much will be. Andy, I joked on Twitter on Sunday afternoon that it was a bad day for all the Purdue doubters or Purdue haters out there, because look, this team is being slept on because of what they did last year. I'm going to keep saying it till I'm red in the face. This is not last year's Purdue Boilermakers basketball team. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer looks so much better and more confident, despite the fact that Purdue also didn't really get much of anything from Braden Smith on Sunday. You get in a transfer like Mr. Jones coming from Southern Illinois that we've repeatedly said, Andy, what a crazy level of athleticism he brings to this thing. And just, this is not the same Purdue. So for those of you that have just jumped to, oh, well, you know, let me push my glasses up. You saw what happened last year. Like that's not it. It's not the deal. So Purdue is right there. And Andy, while yes, I agree about Gonzaga being one of the other hottest teams, the other one is the UConn Huskies. Dude, they also raced by Northwestern. Final score was 75-58. One of those situations where the final score does not accurately reflect what an absolute beatdown this was. UConn is just doing it to anyone and everyone in their path. At halftime of this game, it was 40-18, Andy. 40-18. So Northwestern joins the likes of Colorado State and Virginia in the under 20 crowd of the first half of a game in the NCAA tournament this year. But I mean, what about the Huskies, Andy? They are rolling. They're making very much it look like the Sweet 16. No reigning national champ has made it past that. I think they might leave that in the dust unless we get some magic from Jaden Ledee next weekend. What are you thinking about these UConn Huskies and what they did Sunday?
Yeah, Donovan Clingan double in the first half. He looked outstanding. I think he had 8 blocks in this one in totality. Just when he's healthy, and that's the big key for them, is he hasn't been healthy consistently throughout the year. They've had a handful of other injuries. Castle missed time, Caravan missed some time, but this team's healthy now. And when they're healthy and fully healthy and Klingen's playing like this, they are unstoppable. I mean, he was pinning shots off the backboard. He was screaming and yelling. He was getting very vocal. He was scoring with ease around the rim. Like, this team is so dynamic when he can do that because they have the floor spacers around him with Spencer and Caravan. They have the dynamic do-it-all point guard in Tristan Newton. Like, they have all the pieces that they need. Castle can do a little bit of everything, driving to the basket, playing good defense, stepping out if he needs to. Like, they have so much balance in how they run this offense and how they just move around with the basketball, and they're great defensively as well, anchored, of course, by Klingen. But it's this brand of basketball that they're playing right now is beautiful, and this Northwestern team is not bad at all. And Boo Buie had a rough game, and that was really hard to see just because of how fantastic of a player he has been. He's one of the most, if not the most impactful player in Northwestern basketball history. It was sad to see him walk off the floor at the end of his game. Chris Collins brought him aside and gave him a big hug, and it was a really nice moment. But he didn't show up for this game, and part of that is because of just how good UConn is defensively. And to see them just get wiped off the floor like this is less about them and more about how truly great this UConn team is. Yeah.
Andy, quickly before you move us on, our guy Kyle Boone that's been on the show with us here before actually tweeted out the video of Chris Collins and Boo Buie. And just you can read his lips, and Kyle tweeted, but he said to him, "I love you. You're like family. We did it together." And Andy, that's March, baby. I like legitimately, I read that and I'm getting choked up because it yes, it's about the basketball, but it's about these stories and it's about these young men and the guys that coach them.
Well, at the ACC, they went 2-0 on Sunday. They now have 4 teams in the Sweet 16. That is the same amount as the Big 12 and the SEC combined. The ACC did not get that kind of love in the regular season, yet here they are, folks. Maybe Brad Brownell, maybe he was onto something. We're going to talk more about that. But first, this week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. And Isaac, we're talking about those Boilermakers of Purdue. It can only be described as a Nissan Armada. This top seed is as hardcore as it gets out there. They made it clear by destroying Utah State in the second round of the NCAA tournament. They're a favorite pick by many to make a run, and they're going to face Gonzaga on Friday to try to make it to the Elite Eight. So take the Nissan Rogue, folks, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com.
Andy, this episode's also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets. Thank goodness. Mine is so bad because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. Heck, you can even pick who's going to win it all a couple Mondays from now. Tennessee opens as a 2.5-point favorite over Creighton in what's going to be an incredible matchup coming up on later this week. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Andy, we got to get into talking about these two ACC teams that joined North Carolina and NC State, giving the ACC exactly 1/4 of the Sweet 16. So hilarious, given how maligned the ACC has been this year. This is a conversation that Andy and I will have later this week, just about conference affiliation of the Sweet 16, because it's a wild thing. And three of them are from the state of North Carolina. You combine the ACC and the Big East teams left, and they outdo how many teams the SEC, Big 12, and Big 10 have combined. Andy pointed that out earlier. It's wild. And Andy, you mentioned it, Brad Brownell's comments midseason about the Big 12 kind of gaming the net. And here he is putting his money where his mouth is, quite literally. You love to see a dude backing it up with his, I was going to say play, but with his coaching and letting his guys go. Andy, Clemson knocks off Baylor, one of just 2 seed upsets we had all weekend. Of course, the only ones were a 6-3 and a 5-4. We just so chalky all weekend long. How did Clemson do this?
Yeah, I love the story that Brownell was able. I mean, you know that the second he saw the bracket, he circled Baylor and he said, "Okay, we got to win this one," because I talked my crap about the Big 12. Right. I publicly said that I think that conference is gaming the net system, that we're just as good. He specifically mentioned going 9-3 as the ACC went 9-3 against the Big 12 in the non-conference. There is nothing he could have done better than beating a Big 12 team in the NCAA tournament. And not only doing that, but having the rest of the conference back him up in a major way. Obviously, we've said plenty of words about Virginia and the disaster that was their first game in the play-in. But since then, the ACC has been cruising. You mentioned NC State. Obviously, we saw that. We saw Duke. We'll talk about Duke a little bit later. Their win over James Madison. North Carolina has continued to advance and well. But really, this was just a great effort from Clemson stars. PJ Hall had a great game, as we expected him to do. Baylor's offense just really didn't show up much in this game. They struggled in the first half. We've kind of seen that from Baylor at times this year. We saw them. The most notable example was that Michigan State game back in December. But in this game, they just weren't consistent enough offensively. Ray J. Dennis and Jacoby Walter had 47 combined points. Jaden Nunn, Eves Missy, and the entire Baylor bench combined had 7 points. Isaac, they had 7 points on 3 of 16 shooting. Depth was just not there for the Bears. Meanwhile, Clemson just continued to kind of keep that lead out. They never really let Baylor get all the way back into the game. Really nice performance from them. And Isaac, 2 years in a row that as a 3 seed, Baylor doesn't make the Sweet 16. Last year, Ryan Nembhard hung 30 on them as the 6-seeded Creighton Blue Jays advanced. Right. Now we got it again with Clemson. This too early to have a serious conversation about Scott Drew. Obviously, winning a national championship gives you quite a bit of grace, but certainly some frustration in Baylor because of those 2 losses.
You know, what's funny? It's the exact same conversation we had yesterday about Kansas.
Yep.
Winning national champion and then kind of early exits for a little bit. Andy, I do want to push back on one thing you said. I didn't think PJ Hall had all that great of a game. Honestly, he was in and out with foul trouble.
Yeah, foul trouble was a big issue for him.
Right. And just 4 of 11 from the field. And so like that was kind of my takeaway was like, despite PJ Hall not having a typical PJ Hall game, you had Chase Hunter really stepping up, picking up the slack, leading the team with 20 points. He's been great in both of their games in the NCAA tournament. Now, Clemson, look, they tried to fumble this thing away down the stretch, Andy, and Baylor, much to their credit, kept fighting, kept pushing, kept getting back. But I love watching Ian Shufflin play because he's this dude where the whole Clemson band has chef's hats on for Shufflin. And he's just a dude that he's like Tyler Kolek, right? You don't expect him to come out and kick your butt, but there he is doing it. He had that little flip up over his head and missed the free throw, but who cares? It was a great shot. And so, Andy, This Clemson team, man, they've looked like the better version of what we saw Clemson in the non-conference portion of this season. And so if they can keep that rolling, we're not getting into Sweet 16 stuff yet, but like what they might be able to do against Arizona. Elsewhere in the ACC, Duke. Was this their best performance of the entire season? Just blitzed James Madison 93-55. All of these Cinderellas, unfortunately, just laid down and died on Sunday. Andy, Jared McCain. I've been in love with his game all season long, but my guy, this was the Jared McCain special. Started off 6 of 6 from 3, finished 8 of 11 from 3, 10 of 15 overall, 30 points, 5 boards and assists. Just phenomenal stuff from Jared McCain. When he's doing that, it's okay that Mark Mitchell only had 2. It's okay that Flip only had 14, because Jared McCain has been putting this team on his back. And I've been saying for a while now that I think he is their most important player, and he proved it again on Sunday.
It's fun. Every year there's players who dramatically boost their NBA draft stock by having a strong performance in the NCAA tournament. And this year, the NBA draft just class is incredibly weak, and that's been talked about ad nauseum. And there's so many of the top guys who didn't make it into the tournament at all. Like obviously Isaiah Collier is the most notable example for USC. There's guys who were out of the tournament early, like Dillingham and Shepard at Kentucky. And so Cody Williams is out now. The Baylor guys are out. Like there's not as many fun prospects to watch. And then finally, we got a performance where we're like, okay, this is the guy who the scouts are going to start finally, giving some flowers to, because McCain has been, he's been on that radar, of course, for a long time, but he came out and he looked like an absolute dude in this game. And yes, James Madison does not have a lot of NBA caliber defenders, on the perimeter or in the front court, but to still be able to do this the way that he did, I mean, just an absolutely dominant performance. And like you said, helped carry a team that needed it without Mark Mitchell doing much, without Filipowski having the type of game that he typically does. Like this was a huge performance from him. And you mentioned this being one of the best, if not the best performance from Duke. And yeah, I think I'm with you there. We're talking about, these Cinderella teams that some of them put up fights, like Oregon put up a fight, obviously A&M put up a fight, but these kind of mid-major teams that we were expecting to see them really kind of challenge some of those top teams, they didn't really do it. Grand Canyon kind of hung around a little bit with Alabama for a while, and we'll get to that game later, but didn't hang around long enough for it to be super competitive. And James Madison was kind of one of the big darling teams, and Duke really just put them in their place immediately in this game. And Terrence Edwards had to go to the bench with a couple fouls early, and that really, I think, just threw James Madison out of their routine, and Duke never looked back after that.
Duke will have Houston coming up this week. This version of Duke, they might have something for the Cougars, my man. I'm hoping not, because I've got the Cougars winning it all in my bracket, but this version of Duke is looking really good.
Well, Isaac, Marquette moves on. They held off a furious effort from Colorado. Colorado tried to do what they did to Florida, didn't quite get it done here. Marquette moving to the Sweet 16 after a huge game from Tyler Kolek. Boy, he looks fully healthy the way he's been playing for Shaka Smart's team. We're going to get into that and the rest of the results from Sunday during the day. Coming up after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are the perfect fit for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Thankfully, LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire. It also gives you access to professionals that you cannot find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process both easy and intuitive. Hiring is super easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, and they may not have the time or the resources to hire. So they're constantly finding ways to make that process even easier. For example, they just launched a feature that helps you write your own job descriptions. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Isaac, let's get into these last couple of results from Sunday as we kind of finalize that Sweet 16 field. Marquette moves into the Sweet 16, becomes the third Big East team to do so behind, of course, UConn and Creighton. They needed every bit of it against Colorado. KJ Simpson tried his darndest. He willed Colorado to a win over Florida. He almost did it here against Marquette. Fantastic game for him. But Tyler Kolek, 21 points, 11 assists in this one. Really, really nice game. Like we said, he missed the Big East tournament with some injury stuff with the oblique. He does not look like he is being impacted by that whatsoever. Shaka Smart's team kind of exercises some of those demons from some early losses, and they're now back in the Sweet 16 with an opportunity to advance to the Elite Eight if they can take down a surprising run from NC State, who finds themselves in the Sweet 16 as well.
Yeah, Andy, I'm with you on the Kolek thing, man. Whether or not he could have made a go of it in the Big East tournament, it just was the right call to not even risk it, because for him to look like he did on Sunday, and after a 2-day short turnaround, like I wasn't as worried about Friday. I was worried about Sunday, how he would do after that first game. And man, I mean, I just felt like this was even better. You just gave us his stats. And that was my favorite thing about this game, was the point guard matchup between he and KJ Simpson, who I think legitimately are two of the very best point guards we had in college basketball this entire season. And so that was my favorite thing about this game. You know, you talked about Kolek having 21. Simpson had 20 points himself, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, just really, really good stuff there. And then, you know, De Silva had a nice game, 17. Cody Williams, 12. Eddie Lampkin, 13. And so for Colorado, as you said, from what they did Friday, and then to almost do a similar thing here on Sunday, and you know that Marquette had to have that in the back of their heads, Andy. That's just what happens as an athlete, where it's like, oh, we saw what happened to Florida. Is that about to be us as well? But it just wasn't. And especially, Andy, for Colorado to do what they did after the first half that Marquette had, where for a while they didn't miss a 2. They made their first 12 2-point shots, finished 13 of 15 from 2 in the first half. But I think if you're Colorado, you're maybe feeling good. Like they just did that, and we're only down. I think was it 11 at halftime, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yeah, that sounds right. I think so.
And you know, in that vicinity at least. Yeah, 45-34. And so just great resolve by Colorado. It was part of the story of their season, just up and down, given everything they had. I really expected and wanted more from them, and we just never fully got it. But great run. Cam Jones, great game for Marquette. He was on fire from 3 as well.
Yeah, we had 2 more games to get to here. We had the 4-seed Alabama taking on Grand Canyon, the 12-seed, who upset St. Mary's in the first round. Alabama took care of this one. 72-61 was the final score there. We mentioned a great guard battle between KJ Simpson and Tyler Kolek. We also had a great guard battle in this one as well. Mark Sears, 26 points for Alabama. He also had 12 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 steals. Did a little bit of everything for the Crimson Tide. Meanwhile, Tyan Grant Foster, he had a phenomenal game against St. Mary's. He had an equally excellent game here. Not very efficient, but Grand Canyon had no other offense other than Grant Foster. He had to do everything. He dropped 29. Nobody else had even double figures for Grand Canyon in this game. He had very close to half of their total points. He was 9 of 22 from the field, which is not terrible. He was 9 of 16 from the free throw line, which was a bit of a problem for Grand Canyon. And the other note here is Bryce Drew, the head coach at Grand Canyon, takes a loss on the same day as his brother, Scott Drew, of course, the head coach at Baylor. So maybe some therapeutic phone calls going on between the two of them after both their teams take a loss and fail to advance to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I saw they showed Homer, their dad, the former Valpo coach, in the crowd, but now I can't remember which game it was. Yeah. I'm wondering if he tried to make it to both or how he decided which game he would be at, but crazy stuff there. Yeah, Andy, this game, the Grand Canyon, Alabama, was just knock down, drag out. I mean, there was a play, I can't even remember what happened. I think Mark Sears, gosh, he's so good at basketball. My word. I think it was a tie up or something, or he got fouled and he was on the floor and he gave the ball to the ref and then just collapsed onto the court because it was so physical. Like Grand Canyon just plays such aggressive basketball. But it just, they were too loose with it. Their offense at times was weird and took shots that they shouldn't have taken. I thought if they were more, if they had if they were more in tuned offensively, they could have put up more of a fight here against Alabama. And the final score is 11, but there were some very close moments. Grand Canyon took a lead. I just thought they didn't help themselves get over the hump. And consequently, Alabama is able to pull it off, but really fun. So glad more people got to see Grant Foster play basketball. I mean, he's just a lot of fun. Andy, here's my question. Alabama won this game 72-61.
Mm-hmm.
Can they turn it on defensively like this? And if so, what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, they looked decent defensively in this game. I do think a lot of it was Grand Canyon seeming to not. It seemed like they didn't have any
offensively.
Right, they had one dude who showed up offensively, and that's a little surprising. I mean, Ray Harrison was the player of the year in the WAC last year, averaged like 18 points per game. Like Javon Blackshear came off the bench in this game and didn't play much, but he was a guy who was a huge contributor for them in the past as well. And they just didn't have those guys. And some of it was good defense by Alabama. Some of it was, I thought, Grant Foster maybe playing a little bit of hero ball in situations where maybe he didn't need to do that. But yeah, I do think Alabama does deserve some credit for what they did defensively in this game. And now, having said that, they're going to need to play better defense than they have ever played in this entire season if they want to have any chance of beating North Carolina. That, or find a way to score 150 points on North Carolina. If they can do that, they probably still win that game. But honestly, no, North Carolina, the way they've been playing defensively as well.
That's true.
North Carolina does not have to play perfect defense to beat Alabama. I really don't think they do, unless Alabama somehow has turned a corner and found something they can do defensively that they haven't done all year long. I like Carolina in that game, but yeah, Alabama found a way to win a grinded out game, which they hadn't done a lot this year. So shout out to them.
Well, and it's funny because Alabama and North Carolina played a 4 overtime game last year. Caleb Love kind of played
that one. That was a blast.
Yeah, Caleb Love played some hero ball in that one. He will be at this regional as well. And so just all of those storylines we'll get to later in the week. And to the other game, San Diego State just blitzes Yale 85-57. I don't even know that we got to spend any time talking about it, but Jaden Ledee just continues to be a dude.
Yeah.
I think enough said about this game. Fun run from the Bulldogs. But Andy, the last thing we just got to make sure we touch on, Darian DeVries leaving Drake to head to West Virginia. And Andy, I think the biggest story in question here is how long is it going to be before we get the transfer portal announcement from Tucker that he's following Daddy?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to happen. I think it's a package deal situation. It certainly would make sense for Tucker to not stay at Drake with a new coach. I don't think, regardless of it being Drake, a mid-major school in the Missouri Valley, I just think he is going to follow his dad. Like, why wouldn't you want to keep playing for your dad? West Virginia's got the opportunity to give him immediate playing time. If this happens, I'm very curious how his performance translates to the Big 12. He's not a very good defensive player. I think that's going to cause him to maybe not be able to be played as much just in those games against better athletes that they're going to see in the Big 12. And I'm curious how his offense translates. If this happens, of course, we don't want to just automatically assume that's going to happen, although it sure seems likely. I thought West Virginia was going to go after James Madison's Mark Byington. I mean, they were pursuing James Madison's Mark Byington. I thought that was the direction they were going. So much so, I told you this before we recorded, that I saw a headline that West Virginia had made an offer, and I thought I didn't see the name. I thought it was for Byington, and I was like, wow, James Madison finished playing like an hour and a half ago. That's a little disrespectful if they're already making that offer. But no, it turns out it was for DeVries, who's at least been, his season's been over for at least, a few days. So that's a little bit better. But this is a great hire for West Virginia. DeVries is a great coach. He's had a lot of success at Drake, not just this year, but for multiple seasons consecutively. I think this is going to be a potentially good turnaround for the Mountaineers.
The coaching carousel continues to spin. We'll keep you up to date on all of that as things come. This week, going to be a lot of fun previewing the Sweet 16. We'll do a kind of a massive Sweet 16 show like we had for Selection Sunday for all the bracket previews. So get ready for that. I think it'll drop Tuesday. Andy, is that correct?
Yes.
And then obviously all the other shows throughout the week. And then we'll be coming live at you this weekend as we have this whole weekend as well. So make plans to tune in with us Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Going to be great stuff. If you're not part of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community, why? You're missing out. Come join in. The links in the show notes. It's free. We'd love to have you come be a part of that. If you haven't subscribed to the show on audio and video, do it. Just smash that like button. Also, to let us know you are here. Also, hit the bell notification so you know when we go live. You'll get a notification. You just tap right in. As always, apologies to the Lawyer family, although cheers to the Lawyer family today. Good grief. Let's go Wildcats. The Northwestern Wildcats need a little cheering up. So go Wildcats. We'll talk again on Tuesday. But until then, peace.